I would like to, if there are no objections, have our next meeting at the town hall. Does anybody have any major objections to that? I think that we can do the spacing.
I think it works for me.
What'd you say, Lynn?
It
What
works
is the,
for me.
what is the town board doing?
I honestly don't.
Town
Looking-
board's still doing Zoom calls.
Zoom calls, I think.
Does
Will
any-
they
I
be
mean,
doing it
have any objections?
in
to it?
October or end of September? Will the town board, has it looked at a time when they're gonna change?
Not to my knowledge.
You're the man.
No, I'm not.
Well,
Yeah.
Joe,
We haven't discussed going back to in-person meetings, though you can attend at the town board room. And I think Ed and Andra show up there. And I think there's a few people who occasionally show up.
So
So you
you,
can do that as well.
Everyone will be required to wear a mask at all times during the meeting?
That I'm not sure about. We'd have to follow the rules, but I think the rules say that if you socially distance, you don't have to wear a mask. If you wear a mask, you don't necessarily have to socially distance, and we could do both if we wanted to. I mean, we can decide what we want to do with that, I think, as long as we meet the minimum standards.
The only issue I can see is if there are people there, will we be close to a microphone so everyone can hear everything?
Well, the board members and alternates that have been enacted could certainly sit up at the top row by a microphone.
But that's not socially distanced.
Well, I think there's enough room up there to socially distance us if we only have the board members sitting up there. CJ would probably have to sit at a table in front, and maybe the alternates who are not enacted could also sit at that table, as long as we could socially. In other words, I don't know. I haven't worked out all the details. I just think that we're a more effective board if we can meet in person. And I think that we serve the community better if they feel like we had socially distanced chairs set up so that they could come also.
The last meeting we had at the town board where we socially distanced, I don't think we had room for all the town board members up at the balcony. I think one person had to sit down below. We certainly wouldn't have room for more than 5 people.
well, if we went to the east,
If we.
I could say there was a recent power plant presentation, solar presentation, and I think we had, I want to say like 6 people in the room, including the presenters, and 40 people watching on YouTube. So there was some live and the majority were.
So we have the opportunity or the option to go live and Zoom. Do we have that option? Do we have the stuff to do that?
I'll say this, it was a little bit more complicated because trying to present there lended some kind of tech issues, because having one computer where you're presenting to YouTube and then also projecting requires a little bit of savvy that we didn't have for a number of reasons, but I won't go into not having the right outputs, but whatever. You know.
well,
2 computers.
I also don't want to make it a real big admin burden to CJ and others that have to set that up and manage it. I mean, that's not fair to them either.
Well, I wouldn't feel comfortable if only if we require that all members in that came to the meeting had a mask on while they were inside during the entire process. I don't think, even if they were 6 feet from us, I don't think it's still safe inside. I mean, even like a restaurant, the only time you can take your mask off is if you're sitting at a table or eating. If you're inside, you still have to wear a mask. You go to the grocery store, you have to wear a mask. So I would say anyone in that building would have to wear a mask at all times to comply with all the standards.
That's certainly what I do in my store. Everybody has to wear a mask, even if you're further than 6 feet apart.
Yeah,
from each
I
other
think
all the
we'd
time.
run into, I agree. I think we'd run into a problem if we didn't have everyone wearing a mask.
I'm perfectly happy with doing the Zoom meetings. I think that's worked out pretty well, actually.
I'll second that, but I don't know, it's a matter of serving the public.
All right. Is everybody pretty much in agreement with Tom? You'd like to continue the Zoom meetings instead of meeting in person?
I think right now there are so many logistical problems with meeting in person. If we did meet in person, I agree with Al, I'd like everyone to have masks.
Let me ask CJ a question. Is there some piece of equipment or some more technology we need to purchase to make it easier to have simultaneous presentations for the YouTube and for the things you're showing?
That's a good question, and I think we've resolved it for the smaller board, say. Planning board just happens to be, I think, a fairly sizable board just by sheer number of members. So I think the challenge would be how many people we're planning to attend in person, because I could set up, you know how Pat sets up the laptop for town board meetings and it just kind of points at Ed and Andra. He's not really, kind of moving it around. I could be hosting the meeting from the next room, which I frequently do with town board. I think the key piece is that a lot of the presenters will still be, I'm just thinking of a handful of projects that are coming up. A lot of them will probably want to present via Zoom. So then, to Joe's question, how do I then display in a full screen what they're presenting on Zoom up on the wall? And maybe we just need to kind of think more meta about how all of these pieces kind of fall into line. But
well, for example, if we got a big flat screen that we put up on the wall so that the screen that you're looking at, everybody in the room can see as well. I think there's a lot of value in having this stuff available live on YouTube, because we get 40 people watching it, and that's our constituents seeing it. And if it's just a question of we need some more equipment, let's look into that and figure out how we can make it work. Because, certainly there's advantages to having the town be able to watch these meetings and see the presentations at the same time. And you want the people in the room to see them too. So let's figure out if there's something we need to do to make that possible.
yeah, with the solar presentation, I let the people know who are coming to present that we had an HDMI cable that was 6 feet long. And so you needed to bring a laptop with HDMI, and no one brought a laptop with HDMI out. So that was that. So in any event, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to coordinate with Pat. Pat's our tech guru, and could certainly help us figure something out. Maybe we cast, to the TV. There's a way. I'm confident there is, if this is something you guys really want to do.
Well, I'm not sure that it's really all that important, and maybe this is going to be the way that meetings are held from now on. I was just wanted to find out how everybody on the board felt about it. And if you'd rather meet in person, I personally am a lot more comfortable meeting in person, or I feel that we're more effective meeting in person, but I'm a lot more comfortable sitting here in the easy chair.
I would agree with you, Jerry. I do think we are more efficient or more thorough in person, but at this point in time, I think we just have to stay with the Zoom and try it for a little longer.
I
Yeah.
think the Zoom is very positive going forward if somebody's out of town or something like that too. If we could have the mixed meeting, I think that'd be something to develop as a technological change or able to do that kind of situation.
I think it's going to be difficult for us to be effective with masks on.
I agree that facial expressions are part of this meeting and part of what we all deal with each other when we're communicating. And if you only get to see eyeballs, it may be a lot more difficult. Part of the solution, CJ, might have to do with independent camera. Excuse me, an internet camera instead of a laptop with a camera built into it, something you could stick on a tripod that sees everything, or even you have somebody stand there and run it so that it can look at speakers. But
Oh, okay, kind of like we used to have the video kind of person doing the video, right?
yeah,
Mhm.
I think the YouTube presentation is a huge step forward for each and every board in Lansing and in the country, probably, that people can sit at home and don't have to come down to a meeting time and catch us on YouTube. And probably, I haven't even looked at YouTube, but I assume that you can look up meetings and look at them look at past meetings.
We do have a camera set up in the boardroom to film and stream stuff live. I haven't seen what it looks like through the camera yet, but we did have that installed already.
That's what I thought. Yeah, so anyway, we could look at that, but if the board members really aren't all that interested, we won't pursue it very far. But at some point, it seems to me that we've got to, well, maybe we don't. We've got to make a decision. Either we're going to continue with this and set up some procedures that might help us work a little better, or we're going to try to work towards getting back together to meet in person, or some hybrid facsimile thereof.
Well, I think the vaccine hopefully will be around in the next 6 months anyway. Let's hope.
Yeah, I think
May I
as,
ask? Sorry, go ahead.
I think as we all move indoors, I think probably the risk factor is higher now. It will be higher. So maybe that's not the time to meet in person.
Okay, so do we have anybody waiting to talk at the public information? Or the print
Nope.
board?
I saw a letter come in. Is that Eric Eisenhut?
Yes.
Yes, I presume these people might want to have this read during privilege of the floor for the planning board, the regular planning board meeting, but we could certainly read it here as well.
We can wait until the regular planning board meeting. Privilege of the floor is one place where we certainly have seen a huge decrease in participation from town members on the Zoom meetings, and that's not something that gets helped out by by YouTube meetings or YouTube viewings or anything else.
Is there something you think, does anyone have any suggestions for how we could make this better and be more engaging and
Problems, not solutions. Okay,
well,
yeah,
open to,
I don't think so, other than what we've already talked about. Doug, do you have a liaison report?
I do from the August 19th meeting, which I'll gladly share with you. Since I put it off last week because of the huge agenda, or last time anyway.
Uh-huh.
Where do I start? Oh, here we go. We had no privilege of the floor. So we had no board member responses to privilege of the floor. Consent agenda, we had a motion authorizing Town of Lansing Highway Superintendent to purchase and replacement box broom with a price not to exceed $3,500. And the proceeds to come out of the Lansing Highway Superintendent's budget. Resolution authorizing the Town of Lansing Planning Director to sign a letter of agreement with a publicly released form with William G. Pomeroy Foundation for the Peter Wheeler Historic Marker. Hats off to Joe for that. A resolution to re-levy yearly water and sewer charges on the 2021 town and county tax bill. A resolution adopting retention and disposition schedule for New York State local government records. And a resolution report. That was the consent agenda, and that all passed. Resolution authorizing town supervisor to execute independent contractor agreement with Sue Munson for administrative services and planning and code enforcement department. We had a resolution approving the agreement for the sale of the Gore land at the end of Forest Acre Drive. We had a resolution authorizing an issuance of notice of award and execution of materials purchasing contract for Consolidated Water District Improvement Project and Consolidated Water District Extension 5. And we had a resolution reestablishing Town Center Committee and appointing members. In the work session, we had ethics. We talked about the ethics board vacancies. Basically talked about no board members allowed on the ethics board, but basically we decided to start recruiting. Hopefully you could find people for that. We pushed back a parking lot, lights and cameras discussion in September, which will be this coming Wednesday. We had an issue with Salt Point, people leaving debris and whatnot, being there late, not social distancing. And the Parks and Rec already took care of it prior to that. And other than that, nothing from that meeting. So that I have written down.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
All right, CJ, we want to move right into the land use ordinance audit.
Yes, thank you.
I know
And,
2 hours, but we have an hour and 40 minutes left. Ish.
yes, okay. And to that end, we can kind of, just want to make sure there's enough time at the end to be able to talk about short-term rentals. If the folks from short-term rentals want to talk about those, you could put them in the reverse order if you want. We could address that first, but I just want to leave time to look at that draft 2021 work plan and get a sense of what you guys think for my time moving forward next year. So just to kind of keep that.
I would move toward listening to the rental, so we're not pushed at the end.
Yeah.
And I want to say that that's quite the report that you made. That was very nice. Well done. Okay, Sandy, do you have an update on the committee?
No, I don't. I really
Where you
don't.
were supposed to do it, right?
I didn't know I was supposed to do it. I don't have an update. I mean, we've exchanged some emails back and forth, but nothing, I don't have anything concrete to say.
I think Lynn made some statements, Lynn Day, about the have you guys talked about that or discussed it?
No, we have not.
Okay. Let's
I
try
will make a plan to do that before the next meeting.
All right, that's.
Is our agenda really full the next meeting? That's a good question.
For the 28th or 28th? Yeah, 28th. Yeah, there'll be, yes.
It's a full
It'll
agenda.
be it'll probably be at least 2 hours or so, but we could make some time like Nick did at the beginning of the last one if you want.
Can I address that a little bit? Sandy,
Yep.
you mind?
No, go ahead.
All right, so we spoke with Lynn about it, and Lynn felt that it would be very it would be difficult for the town to police it if we had extensive standards or requirements. And Lynn's feedback also was that we've had very little or almost nothing in regards to complaints to the code office in regards to improper procedures of short-term rentals within the town of Lansing. I did talk with the code officer for the town of Ithaca, who did draft some rules and regulations. They presented it to the legal department, and legal for the town of Ithaca had apparently had quite a few concerns and problems. So that got tabled, and they're still trying to work out the concerns there. My comment to the committee was that I thought because of the lack of, we don't have a lot of complaints, that anything that we do should start out as more of a limited standards or requirements. And so my recommendation was that we just, the town require for all short-term rentals, a more or less a sign up. And on that sign up would be the owner's name, the owner's phone number, the manager's name, manager's phone number, email address. And if any complaints came in, the town planning board or the town planning department could forward those numbers and ownership to the property owner and let the property owner deal with the contact rather than trying to have the code enforcement officer deal with it. And then as well as having a short-term registration where it might be a yearly basis, and there would be documents filed with the town code officer regarding, different requirements in regards to the parking, emergency phone numbers. In other words, the owner would just fill out a form, and he or she would also certify on that form that there are working smoke detectors in all the bedrooms. There's a fire extinguisher. There's a CO2 monitor. There's a map on the property that shows where parking is eligible and where parking should not be. Some minimum standards rather than a lot of details.
So almost like a checklist. So we have the contact information and then a checklist, do you have, parking, egress, smoke detectors, kind of like that. Is that what you're thinking of, Al?
Yeah.
I like where we're going here. With Kristen's B&B, Lynn came and checked to see if there were aggressible windows. Lynn came to see that there were fire extinguishers. Maybe there's a fee to get people signed up, but I don't know why their rental is different than a B&B rental in terms of safety to the people who rent it. Just a thought.
That's okay.
The second thing is, if the county has a best behavior list or a complaint situation, the sheriff, I think, can then answer the complaint.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Enforcement.
Yeah.
One of the
Right.
things to consider when it comes to enforcement too is Lynn doesn't do all the inspections in the town. So there are licensed electrical inspectors, there are different types of inspectors around. And so we don't have to necessarily have our code officer perform all the inspections. So there could potentially be a list of, you know, who would be qualified to do inspections and what, you know, is required in terms of, you know, submittal of photographs or whatever else, so that we don't have to burden our town staff necessarily for inspections.
It's a good idea, Dean.
I think the biggest thing, I talked to Lynn and CJ as well as Al did. The biggest thing was the code compliance. And I think a lot of it was the fire compliance as well. So I believe that might be able to be handled through the fire department as far as any issues in that regard. I agree with you, Dean, a little bit. However, any code compliance issues would have to go probably through Lynn. I mean,
Potentially eventually, but not necessarily to start with. So somebody who's qualified could go out and check every room for, you know, egress and smokes, and if it wasn't compliant, then it would potentially be
that would
referred
go
to
back
code
to
officer.
that would go back to the fire, I think, fire inspection in that regard. And typically those are asked for every year in this situation. So at some point it's going to burden somebody.
As a
I
whole,
say it doesn't need to be done. I'm not saying that. I'm just
In the
getting to the
hotel
point
business-
that they brought to us, to me, and to Al.
in the hotel business as well as the B&B, I'm sure, you've just plain got people who come around and inspect you. Code enforcement comes around to inspect us.
Mhm.
The fire department comes around to inspect us. The health department comes around to inspect us. And a Airbnb should be, in my opinion, not really different from that. They may not be in the business as extensively, but then again, they might be. And public health and safety is what we're all interested in here, and not necessarily just keeping track of what's going on with the Airbnbs.
So it sounds like we have two components or two major concerns. One is health and safety, and the other one is potential complaints. Is that correct?
I
I
think
would
so,
agree.
because I think having a registry allows someone to say that, well, wait a minute, you know, the neighbors here are saying there are all these people coming in and going out and there's something wrong. And then you check and see, well, this isn't registered as an Airbnb or any kind of a short-term stay, then there should be some kind of penalty.
What we do for Sunnybrook Builders for a local frat, they're in the city of Ithaca, and we act as their agent. And they are required to have a local agent. And so that's one of the questions I think that you need to ask for an Airbnb is often it's, you know, the owner can be in Arizona. The question is, do you want to have a local agent contact for them so that complaints can be addressed locally?
Right. That's why we were saying to have a registry that would have the local manager's name, phone number. I mean, again, we mentioned this before. If you go to county clerk's records, sometimes the ownership is in a corporation name, it's in a trust. Also, there's no phone registry anymore. So if a neighbor wanted to call the owner up and say, hey, look, you guys are parking on my lawn all the time, there's no way to access the owner's phone number and or email. So if we had a registry with all that information, we could forward it either to a neighbor who has a complaint and or the sheriff who may want to handle the complaints.
But don't you think that the proper place for the neighbor, if they have a problem with people parking on their property, the proper place for them to call is the county sheriff's department, and not the town code enforcement?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Well,
they-
actually, I think they should call the owner up first and deal with the owner before they go to the
Right.
sheriff. I mean,
Well,
it's just being neighborly.
but in most cases, I think that calling the sheriff would get you a quicker response than almost anything else if you want vehicles off your property or if there's a dangerous situation.
But certainly not the code enforcement officer.
Correct.
He's not a policeman.
Right.
So, does anyone have a feel about what is short-term rental? So if you rent your cottage by the lake, for 2 weeks during the summer, is that considered short-term rental? Or if you rent it for a weekend, I mean, then you get into that situation, what is considered short-term rental?
Not even that, you get into a situation where people with Airbnb
I didn't hear
or
that, Doug.
VBRO
Yeah.
or whatever.
Doug,
You're
you
getting-
cut out. Can you repeat
Yeah,
that?
everybody's been cutting out on me.
Oh.
I can't hear, I didn't hear half of what Al said initially. I guess it would go back to is everybody registered with a Airbnb or VBRO or whatever it may be? If they're not, and they're just renting on the local shopper paper or something like that, I mean, they're not necessarily registered with anyone. So, I mean, they're renting their place out, you know, and basically we'd have to peruse the local paper or the local shopper paper. So, you know, I'm not downplaying this in any regard. I'm just saying there's other issues that arise when people don't go through the normal channels of Airbnb or something like that.
And
So-
if you make it difficult for them to go through the normal channels of Airbnb, they're gonna find another way to do it.
Right. So, I mean, they're finding, you know, and not, I mean, where do you draw the line? I mean, we can put all sorts of regulations in or suggestions or contact information, that's fine. And I don't disagree with that. I mean, if somebody's parking on my property and going across the street, well, I got a little problem with it. But, you know, that's,
Well, I think the issue is if we have a registry for places and then somebody is renting not through an official organization, but they're having people who are renters who are really pains in the butts, we could have some kind of, or a disturbance in the neighborhood. We could have some kind of a penalty saying, okay, wait a minute, folks, you've been renting this place, you have been disturbing the neighborhood, parking all over the neighbors' lawns, there's a fine.
That requires a police agency to be out there doing something with it, and I'm not sure we want to get involved, but.
I think we got another
Okay.
situation there. As I remember in one meeting, maybe the last meeting, there's a company that'll identify who's advertising online, whether they go through the shoppers or not, I don't know. The other thing you address is, let's say, Aunt Sally's family comes up for 2 weeks every summer. It's a relative, and that adds more complexity to the problem. But anyway, I think there's a way out. Other towns are doing it. So I think there's just a best practice to find.
CJ, you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to share quickly this request for a proposal that the county is planning to issue if they haven't already. Al might have some additional information on that, but the idea for the database they're looking to collect would be the following bulleted items here, and updating this on a monthly or more frequent basis. And then in addition, interested in vendors who can assist municipality with enforcement, such as permitting and registration, and then preparation of and mailing of form letters. To some people, they might look at this and think, oh, it's county getting a toehold into, you know, code enforcement, which, you know, I guess it depends on your perspective on that. But they seem to be wanting to help because they realize a lot of municipalities are in this kind of boat together. So I don't know what you think of putting forward some comments on this, or you know, just kind of participating in this process, not necessarily leading it ourselves, but I could just kind of keep you updated and kind of where it's going.
There's a tax implication too.
Room tax?
Yeah. I mean, Kristen has to pay room tax.
Right.
Lynn, how much, Lynn, does the town have to inspect it every single year or?
No, it's just a one shot. Glenn
Oh, it
came
is.
in.
And
Do you have
what's the
that?
fee,
Do
what's
you
the
have
fee for that?
I didn't do it. I don't know. It was her business.
With our hotels in the village of Lansing, they come and inspect, code enforcement comes and does a physical inspection of the properties every year. And they check mostly the health and life safety items. But they have a checklist of stuff that they go over and we know what they are. So we make sure that, it gives us a chance to go through and make sure that prior to that inspection, we have everything up to snuff so that egress doors are working and they're closing by themselves and latching and the emergency lights are working and the generators working, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep. We charge, just FYI, fire and safety inspections for less than 5 units are $25. And Lynn has mentioned that keeping it affordable helps encourage people to comply.
Yeah, that was my concern. Yeah.
Ah,
That's cheap.
It's real cheap. For 5 or more units, it's $50. And I asked him, I said, oh my gosh, with the amount of time that takes. But he, really believed in wanting to encourage people and keeping it at a low price to do that. So
This,
our loss leader.
what the county is doing is collecting the data, right?
Yes, that I showed on the screen. So
Mhm.
that kind of whole list of like,
Yep.
like Dean was saying, like the agent or operator,
Yep.
Versus the owner, like some other of you were saying, and then kind of aggregating that by like scraping the data from VRBO and Airbnb, like that aggregator I showed you, Air DNA. It's kind of like that, but probably more in depth. And then there's these optional enforcement services that we could possibly maybe take part of or, subscribe to as part of a broader group.
But this doesn't, would that almost take the place of doing some short-term rental registration checklist, whatever that we are discussing? Or we would still need some kind of registration process?
That's a really good question. I think it kind of depends on how this plays out. I know they put this out for proposal, and I think they've gotten a couple proposals back from a couple firms. But it could be something like where we use each other's data in kind of a more virtuous kind of cycle, for lack of a better word, like, how we can download parcel data from the county assessment. We can also use that as a tool in other areas. So it could be that they just aggregate all this stuff for us, collect it all, and then we maybe do the fire and safety inspections and send letters out to those people. So it could act as our registry, but then we could do the enforcement piece of it, and maybe they help with some of the letters of like, okay, it's time for your annual report or whatever the case is. So maybe there's some, work we could do together here rather than, create a new thing just for the town.
I would point out that what we might do is just license these Airbnb rentals, these short-term rentals, under the idea that a small license fee of $25 would pay for the processing and keep it, but it would also give us the stick to say, you've been a problem. The sheriff gets called every weekend on your place. We've been having to hound you to keep up with this, and we take the license away and then close them down. And so, it gives us more than a registry would. The registry would tell us, who ought to be licensed. But I got to license my dog. I think asking someone to license their short-term rental is not that much more of a burden.
I guess I would want Guy to weigh in on that. I want to make sure that the town is not going to be liable if we're requiring licenses. Like, somebody comes back on us and say, well, they're licensed. Didn't you check this, that, and the other thing? And I just want to make sure that.
oh, good
We
point.
really haven't had that many complaints, have we? I mean, we've had a lot of dog complaints over the years. That's why we license dogs, but Airbnb complaints, I think that we had the one up on Emmons Road, but I don't think I've heard anything from them lately.
I think you want to get
Yeah.
this.
There was
in-
another, oh,
I think you want to get this in place before you start getting a ton of complaints, because I think what you're going to see is as the town of Ithaca starts putting in their licensing procedures, it's going to push people who don't want to follow those procedures outside that limit, and then we're going to start seeing things. And so I think if we get something in place now, before you start getting a pile of complaints, that will be all set up and ready for that obvious migration.
Thank you, Joe. Did we have something that who said, or didn't we have a discussion at the beginning of this conversation that the town of Ithaca had pulled back their suggestion or whatever they were going to do because legal got involved?
Yeah,
we
Al.
Yeah,
did.
but that's what Marty, the code officer, told me a few weeks ago when I called him up to inquire the status of the town of Ithaca's proposal to implement the some standards requirements. So I believe that's still on hold.
Yeah, keep in mind, that's the town of Ithaca, so they tend to be a little over the top.
But
So,
it's probably a good idea to let them take the heavy lifting here. And then we can look at what they do and see what would apply to us, rather than having all of us in the county trying to do the same thing at approximately the same time. We can sort of share, like CJ was saying, with information coming in from the county may really be all that we need. And
I
if
like
you feel that we ought to do something with licensing, then that's what our committee is set up to try to come back to us with information. But if we're going to get on with this audit, I think that we better get on with it, or we'll go through another working meeting without very much attention to it.
I would just mention that the town of Ithaca also has a registration for their long-term rentals. They put that in effect, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago.
So the committee, do you agree to put this on hold until we see what the county does?
Good idea.
Yeah.
I would think that, well, I don't know how fast the county's going to move on it, but I would think that you guys want to discuss it and see what you come up with, but keep your eye on, in other words, don't put it on hold. Just keep your eye on what's going on down in Ithaca and see if there's any direction that they're heading that might be the same direction we want to head.
Right, but we don't want to develop a checklist or registration template and all that when we may or may not use that.
I think that's true, but I don't think I would stop the discussion.
Okay.
Okay.
No said, I think that we do want to be ahead of it. If it looks like it's going to be a ballooning problem, we certainly want to be ahead of it if we can. But we don't want to end up causing a bunch of problem before it becomes a problem. I mean, a lot of expense and difficulty for the code enforcement. I think
We will buy a light for Sandy's car so she can drive up and solve any problem.
Ah,
Yeah.
I mean, a rotating one on top of the car.
Just flashing is good enough.
to make it rotating. What color should we use?
Walk soft.
Purple.
No, walk
Purple.
softly and carry a big stick, right? CJ, will you keep us looped in?
Yeah, to the short-term rental
Yeah.
piece that the county is
Yes,
doing. Yeah,
yes.
absolutely. When I hear back from Nick on it, I
Okay.
will be happy
Thank
to
you.
pass it along to the
Thank
little
you.
committee. Absolutely.
All right.
So, okay, in the interest of time, I know we had spoken about in the past, continuing to go through each one of the questions individually. I want to just check back in and make sure that's what you would like to do. I know we lost a little bit of ground to COVID. But at the same time, I know that we want to get moving on making the changes here in this coming year. So hopefully you got a chance to look at the work plan and what my intention is regarding being able to bring some of the work you've already done to life. Now, the goal of this audit is not to be frustrating and time consuming. It was to familiarize me with the zoning, because I think the one way where you really get to find what's good and what could use improvement about something is to use it as a tool and to learn about it and figure out what its strengths and weaknesses are. And so just by going through this with you, I've learned a lot, and then also on the day-to-day basis. And what I think we could use more than anything, and I think all of you have brought this to some degree of light, is some graphics to go along with depicting some really specific things. And I've definitely heard from you about form standards. I've heard about buffers being another one of them. And trying to bring some kind of visual life to the huge wall of text that is the zoning ordinance currently. So what I'm planning to do is I've put money in the consulting line for the upcoming year to select a firm to work with us specifically on the graphics portion of the land use ordinance update. I think we can handle most of the text together, me and to all of you, and hire a firm to do that. And my intention is to also apply to Park Foundation again to their the specific pot of money that they have to help pay for these types of projects. Speaking of Town of Ithaca, and to help defray the cost of that, which will be substantial. But I think in the end, we could in the next year get through all of the text changes that A, you've already made and want to keep, B, the ones that we want to see as a result of the audit, which we're going to come up with our kind of top hits from the audit and kind of what our low, medium, hanging fruit is, and then figure out exactly what you want to bring to life in the zoning to help people become more acquainted with it, so that we can now use the E-code system. That I don't know how many of you had a chance to check it out. It hasn't been fully rolled out yet and put on the website yet, but we could really bring essentially the zoning to life and tie it to mapping in a way that we really haven't before, that I think will help people become more familiar with it. So I think in the next 12 to 18 months, depending on the scope of what we want to do, I think we could really get done what it is that you want to have done with the land use ordinance, because I know it's been kind of hanging over your head. But that said, zoning is not set in stone. It's something that's supposed to change every so often. Like it's supposed to be a living, working document. So I don't know what you think of that. And I know that's kind of sort of segueing into my work plan. It's putting a little shout out in there for that. But yeah, so.
Well, I think that as we go through, I think we should go through this question by question, because I think it does good for all of us to go through and keep us apprised of what's involved in the land use ordinance. The one thing that I think we could do that would help us to go through it quicker is to recognize that we're not looking for answers to the questions at this point. This is an audit where we're actually bringing up more questions and trying to find out the importance of the questions that are there. So we've already had some members go through and write up some priority lists and some questions to the questions and stuff that we need to answer. And that's exactly what we're looking for here. It's mostly to familiarize ourselves with the content and get us thinking along these lines and bring up any questions that we have. We don't have to have long questions trying to find, because we'll all again at some point. There's no reason to do it times, unless there's a quick answer to be had. So were we starting at number 72? Have I got it right?
I think that's where we left off, 72 or 73.
Oh, yes.
Around there.
I looked through my stuff and I started reading through it and found out that I had nothing from number 78 to number 92 in the pages that were printed. So I have to go to the online version. version.
Okay, so it looks like 79. Yeah, we have something about maximum lot coverage established for buildings. Okay, so I guess 80 is where we are. So 80, do lot sizes conform to the comprehensive plan? And we have yes, and then comp plan, not very specific as the answers.
Should that be coverage per different zones?
Yes.
I think the question is kind of how is it tying to the future land use map? I think that's,
Right.
or is it really tied to the future land use map?
Well, all we heard about when we were doing the future land use map was how it was not a zoning map. It was a comprehensive plan land use map. And so we I think it does tie in pretty good, but we were trying to come up with a target to shoot for in the future land use map in the comprehensive plan.
So it's kind of like pre-zoning.
Yeah, well, we were told many, many times that map was not a zoning map. It was a comprehensive plan over the next 5 or 10 years, and not to try to turn it into a zoning map or make it a map that was tied to zoning as it presently is, but something that may be a direction that we wanted to go in. Is that correct?
You know, it's just strange usually to see parcels. Usually a future land use map is just a little more kind of nebulous. And the boundaries are a little less, I think it's, yeah, I think, yeah, I originally had thought it was the zoning map because they were, you know, pretty close together or, you know, very similar. But okay, I think I sort of follow. Okay, so are special provisions made governing lot sizes in areas where natural features, scenic attractions, public open spaces, or topographical conditions affect the development of the land?
No.
Okay, yep, getting a no. Okay, and so I think the Conservation Advisory Council, and Tom could speak to this a bit better about their work plan for the coming year and what they'd like to do. But one thing that they're working on is, you know, scenic points to be able to actually help establish where a viewshed may be, or where areas the town may wish to put into some open space index to preserve in the future or when a project comes up. But that says there are a few places that have done lot sizes based on things like aquifer availability. That's a kind of one big limiting factor in rural areas, obviously, is you know, well availability. So areas that aren't on municipal water can be sized essentially to what the yields are underneath. This is just an example of this type of zoning. And I don't know if these special provisions matter to the planning board in terms of what you would like to see for our particular list. That would be helpful, I think, to the CAC.
Obviously, well versus septic system comes into the picture on size of,
Availability of water, right?
or public water, which we do reflect.
I know my sister has a property down on Drake Road where before the city water came in, we used to have to set up a pump to turn on for 5 seconds out of every minute and pump water into an underground storage tank so that, because there just wasn't enough water there to flow. There's plenty of water, you just couldn't get it flowing very fast. So I assume there are other areas in Lansing that have the same kind of problem.
Yes.
So many of them may have been covered by the public water system by now.
I see people hauling up water every day.
I know there's a lot of wells that have run dry. Most notably one on Emmons Road, Lynn.
Really?
Yeah, yes. So it's been a very dry summer, so I think there is water issues around town. My husband talked to the guy that delivers water around town, and he said he has been extremely busy this year. Not just filling pools, but putting water into people's wells.
Mhm.
So we would not necessarily be able to address that in a land use ordinance.
No.
Mhm.
I don't think that would be the kind of thing that we could take care of, but.
Just a side comment.
Yep. What she's asking for here is, have we made any special provisions in our land use ordinance that takes into account some of the aesthetic values instead of, or scenic? Well, we have done along the view, Larry's not here, so view shed's not
You
even
shed.
used, but along the Route 34 corridor and Trip Hammer Road corridor and some of that, we haven't done anything to increase the size. And I'm not sure that we want to increase the land size along those areas that are scenic byway stuff.
Well, we do have the setback on those roads is greater than on the, if you will, town roads.
Yeah.
That's true.
Would there be, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Some of the other things to consider would be, and I just read this and I don't remember where it was, the water flow of building not to interfere with, what do they call those? Temporary streams. Seasonal streams.
Intermittent, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I knew there was a word.
So I think that's an area where we may look into it more when we talk about that for the in the land use ordinance.
Okay, I'm wondering if there are specific uses that you would not want to see on the scenic corridor or the scenic byway.
Probably industrial. I don't know.
Dollar General.
I don't think we want industrial.
No, but I think light commercial has a place there if it's properly addressed, and certainly residential has a place, although we don't want to cover it with a bunch of houses and small curb cuts.
Well, I think the reverse frontage situation for that, or buffers, the famous berm situation, I think a lot can be done where you just don't know it's there. And I know that's a cost to the developer, but at the risk of, making it not possible, I think there's a lot to be said for that amelioration of the.
But a berm kind of does away with the whole reason to have a scenic byway by blocking your sight.
But you're just looking at a bunch of trees instead of a swamp.
Yep. Well, I mean, I'm thinking of coming down Trip Hammer Road and looking at the lake. There's very few places you can see through in the summertime anymore because all
those freaking trees down that are blocking.
All grown up over the years. Now that
Kristen could come down when she was a little kid, 1957. You could see the lake. You can't. The scenic place on Esty Hill, the trees are 50 feet high. Or 70. I mean, so I think we got to cut trees down if we want to have that.
Erosion, Lynn, erosion.
Well, we can put in ground cover. I got no problem with that, but.
So you're saying that you're in favor of logging all of the trees out of the highway area and putting in ground cover, right?
Well, at least enough so you can see the lake.
I know it used to be really nice driving down through there. We call it a scenic byway, but pretty much all it is a bunch of trees these days.
Well, you Skyline Drive in Reading, Pennsylvania, it had to be something in the day, but we went down there and there's just trees going up on both sides of it.
damn things.
And Al,
What is the definition of the scenic byway? What is the route? Is it just Route 34 and 34B?
34B.
It's just strictly 34B.
Yeah, maybe 34. I know 34B for a reason.
and Trip Hammer Road, we've certainly suggested that Trip Hammer Road was part of a scenic byway.
So it hasn't been defined then anywhere.
New York State has defined
Yeah,
the route, basically the Lakeshore route, down 34, down Lakeshore Drive. That's all New York State official Cuba Lake Scenic Byway. It's a route that goes all the way around the lake. And you just go
Okay.
online, you can see the entire route.
Good
Okay.
that you talked them into coming in and cutting down all the trees so we could see the lake again.
Yeah.
We had.
no.
If you're trying to find jobs for everybody, I think the state can do that.
So we are.
Okay, so beyond
Yeah.
logging,
Moving on.
Moving
Okay,
on.
Continuing.
beyond logging, what additional uses are we, would you want to see, okay, would you want to see more of, or maybe just some of, I mean, like value added ag, wineries, distilleries, things like that, and maybe a finite number of them, like a floating zone that could maybe allow wineries and distilleries, but only 3 or 4 along the entire byway stretch, right? So then once one touches down, then that leaves like 3 remaining. I mean, what do you think of something like that?
Are you including wedding barns in that wineries and distilleries thing?
Of course.
Event centers?
I mean, that kind of thing is certainly Trelevin, or however you say their name.
11.
Pardon?
11.
Yeah, Trelevin has certainly got a huge feature going on there that I'm not sure that any place in Lansing you'd be able to do that.
Well, fundamental problem is that, you know, people haven't objected to it and there's plenty of room. So he just gets the little light plants and gets 400 people to have a party and collects the money. And you gotta admire that. The question is, how much do you want that going down Trip Hammer Road or down 34B? I mean, to have real wine grapes, I don't think you're going to grow them anywhere on 34B.
Right.
Not into the soils that are good for wine grapes. So you're going to get tank car wine, beer, maybe hops, but it's not even ideal ground for that, a lot of it. So and then you got the water issue if you don't have public water. So I guess it's what people want. But I would look more at small business and let the wineries go on the side roads, my humble opinion. People will find them.
Yeah.
We don't have a scenic overlook.
Well, you did have one on SD Hill.
That's not in Lansing. That's Ithaca, right?
Well, I think we are. No, we start on the level, don't we?
Mhm.
Lansing goes down on the level at the bottom of SD Hill. Correct.
Nobody wants to go park alongside the road and look at a bunch of trees.
Just saying.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right, that sounds like a
Moving
very, no, it's a good conversation, and I wanted to bring it up because the CAC is working on trying to establish where some of these scenic areas are and what you can see from them, from these points, these vantage points, and just kind of want to get a sense of what you envision the scenic byway to be like or not. That's just as important as hearing what you don't want there as what you do. So.
Well, we
You
haven't talked
chew on
any
it.
public open spaces, which I think might be more apropos, that we might want to make sure that we build into some of these developments some set-asides for public open spaces. And that's something worth looking
And trails.
Yes.
Yeah,
Trail.
trails are complicated, but they should be. And I do think getting another legal opinion on how much open space you can require and public open space vis-a-vis the development's open space Those are things that cause some question. And I know even with the trails, how much of that we can require, because kind of went through that about 10 years ago. And I think we really ought to talk to council and see how we can get that to happen.
Did we see, CJ, in your report that you already done something with bringing up a trails committee that's built into another committee?
Yeah, so Deb may be able to speak to this, but the Parks, Recreation and Trails Advisory Committee is ready to undertake a master plan. As you know, I think I've recirculated the RFP to you, the planning board, some time ago. And one of the things that we're going to ask the consultants to work on, which is very important to Lynn's point here, which was determine what we want as the policy during at the time of subdivision, and then what our payment in lieu of will be if somebody doesn't want to do the trails or doesn't want to do set aside. How much will be collecting at the time of that development proposal for exactly what you're talking about. So that's kind of a key piece to that plan they're going to be undertaking. So to that point.
I think we need to decide on the size of the development and when we implement that land that's set aside. In other words, is it going to be a 3-lot subdivision, a 5-lot, a 10-lot, or is it going to be based upon acreage? When do you bring in that requirement that either you set aside some land, you have a trail, or you do a payment in lieu of the land or the trail? So I think that cutoff or that, when do we begin that? I don't think you want to do it on a 3-lot or 2-lot subdivision. No?
I think you want to do it any place where the trail would connect. I mean, if a 3-lot subdivision sits in between two unconnected ends, then that 3-lot subdivision needs to give up a little bit of space on the edge for the trail. And
Okay.
I want to try to make connected trails through the town. It's something that we can look at, and it's not, I mean, it's pretty much going to be set in backyard setbacks, and we actually could control most of it through the use of backyard setbacks and trail set asides in setbacks or side yard setbacks from the in the land use ordinance. And that would ensure that we had enough room for a trail going wherever we thought we needed it. What we don't have is a comprehensive map of the trails that already exist and what it takes to continue them and complete them.
I
And
thought we
maintain
had some,
them.
I thought we had some kind of, oh, it was roads, never mind.
Now, we went through all that. It was put together by the Trails Committee. It was sort of a deal of don't show people that there's a trail going through their property because they will object to it. And so it was kind of it exists. I'm sure they're around someplace, but they're not for the general public. And that's not the way to do it. But it was to, at that time, see if we could even talk about getting to a solution before people started screaming. And so.
I think it was a highly speculative plan,
Right.
conceptual plan that never had any official backing.
Well, it can't have backing because it's called a taking, and that's the problem with getting legal involved in it. It seemed relatively simple until you started to do it.
Yeah.
So is it specifically allowed?
And what Rochester suburbs did it, they did it by fiat, and they came down and gave us a meeting and told us how to do it. And Guy Crow said, you can't do that anymore. I mean, they basically said, we're doing it, and nobody took them to court. So I'll let the young, smart folks deal with this.
Okay.
Are trails allowed and allowed use in our setback requirements? Or is that what we need to do, is set it so that if people are not allowed to build on that anyway, and we set it up so that their setback, a portion of their setback, their rear lot setback can be used a trail or a continuation, I don't see how that becomes a taking or anything that would be useful to the people that live there or in the development.
I've been through this up and down, and what seems like a good idea, people are worried about different kinds of people in the public walking down the trail 15 feet from their house.
But they walk down the street 15 feet from their house, so that's
Well,
not,
they're on a quote public right of way on the road. And this is a right of way if you decide to do it and build it and say, this is the right of way for the trail. This is a future place. You have to have an easement on your property. Landowners don't look at that kindly all the time.
yep, I agree.
Unless they see it before they have built, before they bought the land.
Or even the current
think-
owner of the land may not be just all excited about it. It's
Yeah,
the question we're not solving tonight. I'm all about trails. Been turned down on trails. We talked to the, I don't know, Ruth Hopkins and others. It can consume 2 or 3 cases of wine with a trial and tribulation. But it's a good talk.
So we can move on to 82.
Yeah.
We beat this one to death.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to say one of the deliverables that we're asking for from the team that would be taking care of the parks, recreation and trails master plan would be recommending updates to the town's parkland dedication policies, as well as set aside of recreation and land and payment of in lieu of policies to be used by the planning board at times of specific actions. So the idea is not to necessarily spring things on people, but to kind of figure that into future actions, which is easier to do, with the type of mapping we have now. Okay, moving on. Does the future land use map clearly identify natural hazard areas? I would say no, it does not.
Yeah, does not.
The good news is that we're part of the group who's working with the county on the all hazard mitigation plan update right now. So good stuff coming out of that. Do the land use policies discourage development or redevelopment within natural hazard areas? Somebody said something about we address minimum setbacks from streams, but I don't know that I've seen that in the zoning. Maybe I'm just missing it.
Well, it's going back to the intermittent or a major stream. And that gets to be a classification. Tom's probably an expert on it, but it's a little bit of a first-class mess if there's a intermittent rivulet, or if there is a real stream that people should class A stream, whatever, where there is regulation around it.
Even the intermittent streams, it's probably a good idea to have some buffer around them. Because,
Well, come in your basement.
right,
We could, but we don't currently have any stream setback regulations as far as I'm aware. Or
We typically get a comment from the county when there's a stream that's close by the county. We'll make a recommendation. I know in the past they've said, no construction within 50 feet of this stream or this cliff area, I think in the past. And we've either gone with it or in some cases we've said that was too excessive when we shortened it up, I believe.
okay, but nothing we have in here in terms
No,
of
I don't think we
zoning where
have
somebody-
anything,
okay.
we don't have anything, but I think we do address it through the county's acknowledgement, and we do discuss it in most cases.
I like Joe. I like that, Al. I like that.
But I mean, we have done that in the past. We
Yeah.
do it. We
Yeah.
do address it.
I think it would be nice to have it written out.
Do we have definitions?
Well,
it.
that too.
Um,
Area in the definitions?
We do not, as far as I know, currently delineate stream setbacks, but one way to do it that's pretty flexible and based in, you know, a legitimate rationale would be to do it by drainage basin. So that way it does help address the intermittent piece that you're just addressing, as well as, you know, regular flowing streams. And could be a setback based on the drainage basin. So how much, and Tompkins County Soil and Water could help us come up with that and make the maps and buffer areas, and be really easy to map out and show people. So that's one idea. Someone said, don't build on volcanoes.
I attended the webinar last week about buffers.
Nice.
And the one
Yeah.
thing the soil engineer mentioned is that the buffers are all dependent upon the stream, and you can't say it's 50 feet across the board or 100 feet or 200 feet. He more or less said each case is individual, and you have to look at it that way. And it's difficult to say, in one case it's 50 may be appropriate, in another case 200 may be appropriate. So it's hard to set a definite distance uniformly throughout the town.
Is that because of the floodplain on the different streams?
Well, he more or less addressed it. It really has to do with soil types, the
So
absorption,
erosion.
clay, what the different soil types are, and how they react to surface water, subsurface water, etc.
So would that be something that could be in the regs, that there's going to have to be some expert determination of setbacks based on blah, blah, and blah? But that may be a factor in site plan review.
Well,
That is an option.
Triggered by a larger development type situation vis-a-vis a one-off lot there.
Oh, I don't know, where I live, there's one little house up there that changed all the water coming down the hill.
This whole point of stream setbacks is really important because the waterways are a shared resource. And as people chop down all the trees and stuff right next to the stream, it affects the water quality for everybody downstream as well. So it's important that we have some kind of minimum standards so that everybody downstream is not affected by somebody who decided that they want to destroy the banks of the stream above them.
But I think that's dependent on the stream, very much so with soil and water, or you know, as Joe was saying.
Yeah, we could ask a Soil and Water Conservation District to give us some feedback based on some of our major streams, and I bet you Angel and the crew would be happy to help hone in on a couple of them to see, you know, maybe we could also, yeah, we just mentioned that hazard area. It's possible that we could combine the hazard area maps with the repetitive loss to see maybe where we're experiencing some of the most significant events, and maybe focus on those as kind of a starting point. I know FEMA just put a lot of effort into the Salmon Creek. So now we have water surface elevation levels for that. That might be a good place to start. I don't know. Well, I'll talk to Soil and Water and see what they might recommend, if that sounds good. Okay. Are there provisions for setting standards for temporary or transient structures, such as construction trailers, defining the limits of construction? I don't think I've seen anything in here about requiring that as part of site plan, but we can amend the site plan criteria to ask for that. Okay.
Why would we get excited? I mean, if a given development has to be done within a certain time, why are we saying how many trailers can be there? I don't kind of get it.
Usually it's where you have to not place those trailers. So if I'm doing a whole house renovation, the neighbors probably wouldn't appreciate it if I stuck a construction trailer in the front yard for 6 months that doesn't meet the setback requirements of the neighborhood.
But it,
Temporary.
I mean,
Okay, that way we could tie them to, building permits, when a building permit expires. Could have them removed. Sometimes also limits of construction can stretch to be a huge amount of area.
well, I don't know that this has been a problem, but I'd hate to see construction trailers driving out through the side yards to backyards and going over septic systems and whatever else may be there. There's a lot of cases where you wouldn't be, maybe you just don't have job trailers at that point, but I would think that anything that's only going to be there for 5 or 6 months isn't really something that we have to deal with in the planning board, in the land use ordinance.
I would think that Lynn could deal with it in the permit application.
Right.
Okay. That seems reasonable. Also, the one thing, it's funny because you all mentioned Airbnbs and people's complaints about them, but I can say that one thing that's been a uniform complaint since I got here is people complaining about travel trailers and campers in people's yards. I don't know if you guys hear about that, but this is not specifically addressing that, but like how many travel trailers can you have kind of thing? Like, do you
How
guys
many
ever hear
extra
about that?
cars? We do have many cars. We don't deal with boats and RVs is what you're talking about, or travel.
Yeah, camper thingy, RV, travel
mean,
trailer thing.
We've had developments who had built in, as part of their homeowners association, whatever, or a deed restriction that RVs and boats were not allowed.
Or they have to be in closed areas, off the street, et cetera, et cetera.
Not.
There's a minimum of,
They were not allowed, but.
yeah, I mean, you see things like a minimum of how many of this type of vehicle can be there that's not, total, and then that you can only have one that's not licensed. Like with vehicles, right? You can only have one non-licensed vehicle on your property that's sitting out, so that, you don't have a used car lot with unregistered, unlicensed vehicles.
Maybe we need to define them as a vehicle in the definition, so that you're only allowed to have as many travel trailers as you have vehicles.
Well,
Well,
a travel trailer a vehicle?
Yeah, well, it's a trailer with a license,
That's right. It's
and the
paid for.
RV is distinctly a vehicle.
So we're seeing a little bit of a shift in the way that people are living because of the COVID situation. So people are looking for she sheds, and sometimes it's in the form of a boat on a trailer, or it's in the form of a trailer where they can have a separate place to retreat to, or to have a quiet place to do business or study or whatever. And
Tiny house.
certainly a cheap solution for them, but definitely something we should potentially look at how we want to regulate it.
Well, they're 10 by 10 sheds they come on it's an office, it's all installed, and that's what you're talking about, and then pay 20 grand and you plug in the electric and the telephone and.
Right, but there's a setback for that shed.
Yes,
There wouldn't,
Not a 10 by 10.
That wouldn't be there for something on wheels,
Yeah,
like that boat on a trailer, or that
Tiny house
tow
thing.
behind trailer.
Then they rent them out on short term.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's what the tiny house is doing on Ridge Road.
Okay.
We digress.
All right. Well, no, that's good because that's what I've heard concerns about. It's not necessarily specifically Airbnbs, but the kind of tiny house on wheels thing that's like, it's not a house and it's like mostly tiny, but then it's not a vehicle.
But if we defined them as vehicle, we'd probably run into trouble with people who, as long as they're licensed and have a license plate on them, they would be allowed no matter what, right?
Well, I
So-
can say that I was just gonna say the communities that I've dealt with working on zoning ordinances in other places like, North Country, we'll have people show up with a slew of travel trailers or RVs or whatever, and then not, have plans for how they're gonna deal with, waste and all of that. So some of those places they've become a nuisance. I don't think we're obviously quite there yet, but.
So
Gosh, I hope not.
another thing to consider is that oftentimes driveways are going to be very close to property lines. And these are things that are going to be left in or placed in driveways. So potentially that's why they're going to be close to somebody's neighboring home. And if it's being used as whatever, occupied, then, it can be a noise issue and a disturbance to the neighbor.
Yeah, my concern is that, if we were to, do the Airbnb VRBO thing, we might want to also think about having some kind of registry for something like this, just to make sure that all the RVs and travel trailers have, potable water, approved waste system, all that kind of good stuff. I mean, it's kind of a small detail, but then it's also kind of not, if we, start getting more of these. So anyway, okay, moving on. So 85. Are the side and rear yards in each category adequate to light and air and required by various land uses? I think, yeah. C67.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think that we have pretty decent side and rear yard setbacks and front yard setbacks in each zone. I mean, we've discussed that many times.
Okay, so similar question with number 86.
I would point
Noise,
out-
which kind of brings up, oh, go ahead.
I would point out that some of our zones are so big that some of the neighborhoods ought to be broken up into different kinds of setbacks. Especially where we filled in areas and they still have the same setbacks, but maybe due to the slopes, the setbacks don't make as much sense. So I think this is worth looking at in various parts of town.
Possibly, then we'd be looking at each property individually in a lot of cases, because it becomes an individual situation.
Be just like the lake shore.
Well, yeah, it's like Ludlowville. That whole community's got a 60-foot setback from the road, except most of the houses are only about 10 to 15 feet from the road. And maybe we want to relook at how we do Ludlowville, because it doesn't make sense to say if you have to rebuild your house, you have to push it back another 40 feet.
Correct.
Agree with that, Joe.
That's why we've been talking about having a hamlet zone, and that would be something that would be taken into account if we do that.
Yeah,
That's going to come up in this audit, the hamlet zone, but
I think there's other areas like that we might want to consider.
Like
Like
Ladoga Park.
Lansingville.
Okay, Lansingville.
Hmm.
Ladoga, it seems like everything
Yeah,
in Ladoga
Ladoga
Park
for
is
sure.
being
Yeah.
built right now.
Are
Okay.
you talking downtown Lansingville or the suburbs?
Your house.
only down.
Downtown, Fort Hill Road area.
Downtown Fort Hill Road, yeah.
That's the dump,
I'd say
right?
that suburb, I'd say getting Lockerbie and Jerry Smith.
There's a really nice auto shop up there on Fort Hill.
No, it was the Old Town dump is what I'm saying,
Well,
Moving
and
right
the road.
at the end of the road.
No,
Okay, speaking of attractive nuisances, noise. So another thing that we tend to get a lot of complaints about is definitely noise. Is there any appetite for noise ordinance? Or are we just satisfied with leaving that to law enforcement to deal with? Just curious, like to take the pulse once in a while.
The times that we've discussed noise ordinance, it's come down to how we're going to enforce it. And who's going to go out there at 10 o'clock at night and stand with a meter, sound meter, and listen to it and try to figure out whether they're breaking the law or not. I think it's got to be left up to law enforcement, in my opinion.
What about the,
They decide.
what about the salt trucks and things coming down the hills into Lansing? I mean, has anybody complained about the noise from the big 18-wheelers?
Yeah.
Well, there's a
Like the-
sign by the school at 90 dB, and I think no jakes is probably a reasonable thing to ask.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of drivers, as you know. So there's 18-wheelers you don't even hear. And then you have the people that seem to have a problem and want to be noticed. And I live right next to them up here, and it's amazing. But I think the jake restriction is within reason. I don't know about the noise ordinance. I guess we'll find out what the police can do about it if they don't have a meter and one thing and another. I think it might just be competition, that it might be real noisy some other time from a neighbor. And
Is that a town board issue and not a planning board issue?
Yeah.
I would think so.
We
I
had
think the town board would turn it back to the planning board and say, what do you think?
Well, you would
I'll point out
say,
the
you would
sheriff's not going
say
to.
insulate the stinking building and stay inside.
so when we talked,
Not going to enforce something if we don't have a law, so you can't say the sheriff will enforce it if there's no sound ordinance.
That's what
Right to farm communities.
done by the neighbors.
Setting up noise ordinances in a right to farm community.
so when we were doing all of the venues, we talked a lot about
Yeah.
fireworks,
Right.
and we
And
don't have anything
soundproofing.
that says you can't have fireworks, but we requested everyone not to have fireworks really late.
But you have to have a permit. And so the permits, there are restrictions on the permit at the state level, I think is what we found out, and our
Okay.
local law wouldn't necessarily make a difference.
Okay.
As long as they get a permit, they can set the damn thing off with a qualified individual. Had nothing to do with the noise or bothering other people. And that's where I sent around the thing from Aurora, which came from near Albany. And it does look like that. As long as you have a qualified person to set them off, you can do it.
Because it's as long as it's very temporary. I would think if you start doing it every night, somebody would come up with a law to prevent it.
Well, where were you when we were having that discussion? With the venues, I mean, Americana Vineyards did it every weekend over there. They're out of business now. But
Are they really? Oh, that's too
yeah,
bad.
The other thing we talked about when we talked about the venues was soundproofing.
right.
If they were going to have electrified, amplified music.
And that seemed to be too expensive.
Yeah,
Oh, we did require it, didn't we?
No,
now,
The soundproofing in the barn?
no,
I think the most we got is a time at which they would stop.
which still was a favor,
Yeah.
Right.
according to the attorney to council. If they could have sit downtown Ithaca and go till 2 a.m, it was perfectly fine. So it's just going to have to be neighborhood action that's going to solve some of this. And maybe the neighborhoods might go around and visit some of the town board members at 2 a.m. and share music. You never know.
Maybe the planning board members.
We run into a hard
Town
time.
board has the legal situation. Not the planning board.
Yeah, I don't think that we have any way to enforce soundproofing or electronic amplified music that's making too loud a noise outside. Again, I don't think we have any way to enforce it in the town of Lansing.
And we don't have any law.
But if we had a law, how would we enforce it? Are we gonna hire a policeman to go around and check on it? I mean, I don't wanna make a law that's gonna be ignored.
Maybe the town board would work with the county to have a county noise ordinance like they do in Cuba County. And then the county sheriff could come around and enforce the ordinance.
Right.
Nobody got off their butt and did that either. And I presented that to the town board. Also with these sky lanterns that light things on fire, this last January, one in Germany came down in a primate house and burned up like 40 or 50 primates on New Year's Eve, just for a little celebration. Nobody wants to do anything about that either. So we'll just see what happens.
You
I'm
don't
familiar with
sound
that.
like you're very happy with us, Lynn.
I'm very happy with you. When we were dealing with the venue issue, I'm very open about all that. But if the town wants to deal with these things, and I don't think the town should do it individually, why we have a county up north can figure out how to have a noise ordinance and have the county enforce it as needed. Levy has to stop the band at 10 o'clock at night. The town of Genoa or the town of Ledger does not come down and say that it's a county ordinance. And that requires a town board to pick up and go ask the county to do something like that.
Because the
Not-
county has a police enforcement.
Yeah,
Local law 1 of
Does-
2016, does that sound right?
Does the planning board want to make a recommendation to the town board officially?
well, this little fathead did it by himself, but I would ask that the planning board make that kind of a recommendation. Yeah, it should be common sense.
Don't be calling me a fathead now.
I'm a fathead.
Oh, my God.
Yes, I think that we would be interested in putting something like that together.
I agree.
Yeah, yeah.
Countywide seems the way to go.
Well, there's enforcement. I mean, Lansing doesn't have a police force, so we have a hard time with enforcement. But whatever we can toss onto the county, I think is great.
Of course, Ithaca won't like it.
And
What do
we,
they do in College Town?
Right, they have their own noise ordinance.
Oh,
So
they do, oh, good.
City of Ithaca has their own noise ordinance, yeah.
I tested it many, many times.
Well,
That's
okay, so. Okay, let's see, we have some questions about reference points or lines to lots, especially of lots of regular shapes. Yes, we do have a great little diagram in the land use ordinance for that. Do we have provisions for dealing with side yard requirements on corner lots? Yes.
Let me interrupt you, CJ. Let's put it in a future meeting. Let's put it on the agenda to discuss a resolution going to the town board about that.
About the noise?
Yep.
Mhm.
Town board.
Okay, we could, hold on just a moment. Let me just add that. Do you want to just make a motion at the meeting on the 28th? You don't
Uh,
necessarily have to have a full-blown resolution unless, of course, you want one.
Do we have, well, we'll make a motion. What are you suggesting?
Just that the planning board, we could add on to the agenda, motion recommending that the town board, I guess you fill in the rest.
Right. So we can, do we have a full agenda at the next meeting?
I think it's gonna be between, well, let's see. There's a Cargill declaration of lead agency for the salt shed, which is probably gonna have to go for a state code variance as well as a local area variance. The bank, I think, is coming back for more. There's sketch plan for the retail store on Auburn Road. Hearts, Maple Avenue, minor subdivision. Yeah, so there's like 5
The next
substantial
working
things.
meeting. And we'll discuss that like we discussed the trails thing earlier, or the, and let's, because we want to be able to come up with the proper verbiage for a resolution, I think. to
Oh,
be,
okay. I mean, we could draft you a kind of a sample resolution if you'd like. Oh, okay. I see. Never mind.
then we can pick at it and see what we like and what we don't like, and we can get it back to you.
Okay, perfect.
What, quick question? Is there a way we could find out what other towns have a noise ordinance? Does Dryden, Ulysses, Ithaca?
I
Is
don't
there any
think
way to find that out?
City is the only place in Tompkins County, as far as I know.
Oh, it is.
I could ask.
Town.
county. We want to try to push the county to set up a countywide code enforcement.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just saying it would be, if other towns had it, it would be easier to push that, I think. If it was just the city alone, then it might be difficult to get the county to jump on that bandwagon. That's all I'm thinking.
But I'm sure that other towns might be willing to stand with us if we contacted them.
Good point.
The county is where this belongs since they have a county police force.
The towns would definitely.
Hugo Heights looks like they have one.
They have a police force.
Yep, local law, Article 36 noise ordinance.
I think I see where you're going with this, though, Al, which is the towns all. I think many of them want noise ordinances. I definitely heard that in Danby, definitely in Ulysses, definitely here. Whereas the city and villages already have them, whereas the towns really don't.
Part of the resolution that the town board try to contact other towns, local towns, and try to drum up interest and a little bit of lobbying effort to try to get the county to set up a noise ordinance. But you can put the words together and then we'll look at it and read it.
Is that something county planning would do for us?
I think they might be able to help us with. Yeah, why not? We could definitely reach out, see.
Yeah, that's what I would recommend. See if somebody at county planning could take that a step further and contact some of the other towns to see if there's any interest in a countywide noise ordinance and go from there.
I think that's a great idea.
I emailed you a link to Hugo counties.
No, you know what it is? It's peddling. Peddling and soliciting is what you set out, Dean.
That's what their link was. Their link is
No, it's
wrong.
weird, right? I know.
Yeah.
I just checked it out.
And it's Moravia.
It says regulating noise, 1 of 2016.
Well, maybe peddlers and solicitors are very noisy.
Maybe they are.
All right, move.
Hopefully, Deb, you're able to get on.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, yeah. Sorry about that. I don't know why you weren't.
I think we throw sky lanterns on the county too.
Isn't there a fire ordinance? Would that be the same thing?
Oh,
Could be.
Not sure about the sky lanterns. I can ask about that while I'm at it.
Well, if we can't have open fire, I mean, if you can't have brush fires or whatever, uncontrolled fire, a lantern in the air. That's probably how all the California fires started.
Yeah, a lot of
the
arsonists.
reveal
They
party.
had some arson involved too, with some real special people that need to run the world.
Yeah.
What time is it?
Number 82.
Okay. We're wait.
We're on
82.
88. 88.
Okay. Yes.
89.
Okay. Okay. Our special provisions necessary in dealing with side yard requirements on corner lots. Okay, we already talked about that. Okay, our side and rear yard requirements so inflexible that they would hamper the development of public or private housing projects developed on a large area in the form of condos, townhouses, senior housing. I think we define townhouses separately, but I don't know if we allow 0 lot line for them. Do we?
Well, townhouses where they join together are definitely 0.
But do we, how would we? Do we articulate that in our?
We do not, as far as I know, we don't have anything for condominiums or townhouses.
Okay. So you can have a townhouse, but it just has to be 10 feet from the next townhouse.
But connected townhouses, I think
Yeah.
the only way that you would set that up would be in a PDA or ZBA at the moment.
I believe you're right.
And we don't really have all that much demand for it. I don't know if we need to, if it's a good place to spend our time trying to figure that out or not. If the demand comes up and we get a little experience with it through the ZBA or well, through the ZBA probably, then we could look at it at some point in the future. Unless we think that we have enough experience between us all to come up with a decent ordinance.
I'm sure we can
But-
lift from another town if we needed to.
Yeah, I think we just have to change the configuration for that particular use is all, or for that particular building type.
And
I
decide
don't
what
think-
zones it would go in.
Yeah. I mean, we already defined them. We defined townhouses because we actually had it defined in there twice. That's why I know. Because when we went through the codification process, we had to get rid of one of the definitions. So, so I just remembered that that's there. Okay, just curious if that was a concern. Okay. All right, so setbacks. Are there areas in the community where a maximum setback would also be desirable? I think we were just talking about Ludlowville, right? How, it might make sense to have a max setback in parts of Ludlowville from like areas in Maple. Okay. Okay. Yes. But if there's anything else to add.
No, I'm not sure why we'd want a maximum setback.
Oh, kind of like the Maple Avenue situation where there's a lot of, older homes and there's a specific kind of historic kind of fabric to the neighborhood where, they're all approximately maybe 10 to 15 feet off of either the road's edge or center line, or say 20 feet off the center line. And then you have, so all the houses are kind of all along the street, but then all of a sudden, because of modern zoning ordinances, you have one that's all the way, that's like 80 or 100 feet back. And it's just kind of strange for a low volume road. It helps keep the neighborhood uniformity and character.
Keep the kids smart, don't let them play in the street.
Keep the septic systems in the backyard.
Yeah.
Good for a hamlet, especially a hamlet that's, with small lot sizes, but that are on, septic. It could be good to kind of keep the development towards the front, towards the street. So that could be kind of our hamlet.
But we don't want small lots, according to some people in Ludlowville. Even they're bigger than other lots in Ludlowville. So I guess it's a neighborhood idea.
Yeah, I could see where it might fit into the hamlet zone, but you'd have to be very careful because we certainly need minimum setbacks. And you have to set your maximum setback so there's plenty of room to build what you had to build there.
Yeah, maximums can be good for areas where you want to establish a specific type of character, like say, just, I think of town center as kind of an example, like, the town has that whole section of street now, like with the next thing that comes along, do you want to pull it up to the street and kind of make it a more continuous street wall there to kind of enclose that space a little bit? That's an option for having maximum setbacks. I mean, they're a bit more urban, but they can also be a village or hamlet context as well.
But that is a state road. If you
Oh,
look
no,
at
I mean,
a reverse setback on the town center, I like that idea. Yeah.
oh yeah, that's what I mean to say is that Louise Bement Lane, for instance, like,
Yeah.
bringing the buildings, like if you wanted the buildings to be brought kind of to the sidewalk or closer to the sidewalk, right? But maybe with a little plaza or something in front, you could have a maximum setback, meaning you don't want them like way, out into the fields, Does that make sense?
Properties especially, I could see that. Where we're
Yeah.
trying to get people to build towards the front and put their parking in the rear where it's more hidden.
got it. Not appropriate for everywhere in the town, right? But in some places, maybe you'd want to see this. So, okay.
What the B1 is all about, you don't need to say town center, you just get in trouble.
Oh, that's right. Well, there's the committee now, so I can't help it. Okay. All right, so do special conditions in the municipality indicate it would be better to establish a series of setback distances for varying conditions and types of streets rather than establish one overall setback? Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about, really, is, you know, based on the different types of thoroughfares or the contextual area, B1 as it were, to have different setbacks. Okay. Method for measuring distances could be a little better. There's some things we can do to help clarify, but I think all in all, that's pretty good. I'm not
Are
seeing
we
any
still using
objections.
chains and rods?
For roads, sure. Okay, so are existing setback lines and present regulations adequate to permit homeowners to site their home for privacy and quiet, or for homeowners to build closer to the road if they wish? So
I'd
this is
rather
where we-
like that, but
I think this also brings up a question of, right now, we currently have people who are trying to turn old buildings, you know, in some cases, commercial buildings into residences, and they happen to be right on top of the road. And so, or, you know, very close to it within 10 feet. And so there's some question, if they haven't been used for a long time, like, do they need to go get area variances to be able to, you know, reuse an existing building? I'm curious kind of your thoughts on that. Like a building that's perfectly fine, you know, building code issues, but happens to be, you know, within a few feet of the road that was maybe once a commercial building. There's a couple of these happening right now.
I would throw out that it's probably a good idea for the ZBA to look at them, because every situation's different, but I would say, and I think it'd be hard to write a law and have it apply to the planning board, but that's just me.
I agree with you, Lynn. I think it'd be very difficult to take those little individual situations in the town of Lansing. Now, in a more rural or more urban setting where you had a lot more people involved, it might come up a lot more. But I think the ZBA can certainly handle the quantity of issues that might come up here. I don't think we have all that many commercial buildings that are that close to the roads anyway. I mean, we have some, but we don't have a lot, and I think ZBA could handle that.
I think we talked before about trying to identify things that are non-conforming, just so we kind of have a list of things that are non-conforming on hand. One of the issues, of course, with ZBA is when you come before them, you know, you're guilty until proven innocent. It's assumed that anything you bring before them, for the most part, is self-created, and sometimes, you know, non-conforming is not self-created, it's created by zoning.
So it could be something that comes in front of, well, it wouldn't necessarily come in front of us in a lot of these situations first. So we couldn't make a recommendation to the ZBA.
Yeah, and that can potentially be a problem when,
Right.
you know, you basically have a valuable building that basically can't be used because it doesn't meet the existing zoning, and the ZBA's hands are kind of tied if they really look at the rules of how they're supposed to rule on things.
So how would you set something up that would take care of those situations in a law or an ordinance?
I mean, you could, in your working relationship with the ZBA, you could say that, you know, if somebody runs into a conforming issue for existing lots or buildings, that it should potentially come before the planning board for an opinion, to be forwarded to the ZBA before they make their decision.
I like that.
So do I.
I think you should encourage repurposing a building if at all
Yeah.
possible.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
we
rather
don't
than
want
bulldozing, yeah.
to encourage people building close to the road at the same time.
Right, but
That's what we've desired for that particular zone.
The greenest building is one that already exists, so.
Oh, you took that workshop too.
Well, the question kind of brought this thought up was if people want to build closer to the road for whatever reason, or want to live, Lord only knows why, living on 79, anyone would want to live right on top of the road, but it's not for right now. But in certain contexts, there might be a building already there. One of these happened to be like some kind of utility structure that somebody wanted to turn into a residence. I guess it's well built, but it just happens to be really right on top of the road. So just kind of wondering your thoughts, on it overall.
Well, and there's like barns that are really close to the road. They didn't used to be, but then the roads changed or got wider or whatever. And I could see where, somebody might want to reconfigure a barn into apartments or
Airbnbs.
I think
Event center.
wedding venues. Yeah.
that would go to the ZBA, and if there was some way that we could get our input in there and look at it first,
Yeah.
it made
I
sense,
like that.
we'd be all for that too.
All right. Do conditions exist in the municipality which would make desirable the establishment of special setback lines off drainage ways, areas subject to flooding, public parks or properties? Yep, it sounds like we talked about that a little bit already with the stream
Yes.
setbacks.
And the Ludlowville setback.
Well, we don't have anything for parks, a special setback, and maybe we should, that there be a larger setback, side yard setback or rear yard setback if you're bounded up to a public park. I mean, I could see where that would be a reasonable request.
Also our zone boundaries. So if we're looking at the boundary between, a IR zone and a, residential or ag zone, especially if there's a neighborhood there, you might consider larger setbacks or, again, berming or that kind of thing.
So setbacks in between zones is what I'm kind of hearing.
Yeah, zone edges.
Okay.
That would bear discussion.
Zone
And
edges,
that's
okay.
an idea that we should discuss.
And buffers, this might be a good opportunity to be able to delineate some of those different buffer types and sizes, like everything from like berms and walls to like plantings and things like that.
Or balloons.
Okay. Balloons.
Oh, it's silly time.
Oh, yeah, I guess it's 8:30. That's true. Okay. All right. So just how about these a few more here? Are special setback requirements desirable to apply to public or quasi-public institutional buildings or structures? Meaning, okay, so if the highway department for some reason needs a new building, hypothetically, would we be concerned necessarily about the area surrounding that, or do they have enough land or to be able to accommodate something there?
Since we don't seem to have very much control over where the highway department puts its buildings.
Or a school, or anything by the state of New York. So it's kind of a moot point.
Might be good to have something set up where we had a little larger setback there, just like you would for a public park.
Okay, and I see some information here about the buffers as well. Okay, so maybe not necessarily space-wise, but certain types of screening could be useful there as well. Okay.
Well, certainly when New York State came in and
Highway
built their,
residency.
when New York State came to build their new garage, they
Residency.
didn't ask us to approve it, but they did try to follow our laws. And so the more we put into the law specifically saying, if you build a, big industrial thing, you have to screen it thusly, gives them at least a push towards following it.
Yeah. And what we did to Borg Warner, I mean, pretty well screened.
And burned, yeah.
Mhm.
Not the DOT.
No.
No, do you see how their fueling facility is like right next to the ditch? And,
No, I didn't see that yet.
oh yeah, drive Warren Road, it looks terrible.
Mhm.
Well,
No
have an
screening
airplane
whatsoever.
come off the runway and run into it, and that'll solve the problem.
Okay, on that note,
Sorry.
okay,
Airport
no,
hazard.
that's all right. It's just very disturbing because I've been thinking about the airport hazard area.
Uh,
It's a hazard.
Yeah, that certainly would be. Okay, so
7 at least.
It's certainly not a view shed.
oh,
He's not here. Why do you bother?
I don't know. He might be listening. He might be listening.
Save it for a good time.
okay, are there provisions in the law which govern the orientation of said public building, such as requiring it to locate its entrance or to face in a certain direction or upon a public thoroughfare? Might have been good to have.
Most can't say anything about.
Now this is your reverse road frontage.
Well, I mean, just that important civic and public buildings used to be very specifically oriented so that they, conveyed a sense of, purpose to the public, that they were important buildings, that they were, a centerpiece, of a community. So I think maybe that's what they're trying to get here is not necessarily the building not turning its back, they're trying to hide itself. But proudly being a public or civic structure.
Yeah.
Boy, these things are starting to sound antiquated.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So, does the town currently have special provisions required to control location, height, and character of walls and fences? Kind of minimally.
6 feet right on the property line.
We have some height requirements and
Yeah, isn't it 6 feet unless it's a deer fence?
Yeah, and then it could be, I think it's 8 with.
Wide
Wire.
mesh. Razor wire.
And the posts have to be on the fence builder's side.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
that
so
specific?
finished side facing the road or abutting properties, right?
Ah,
And do we want to say anything about materials? I mean, do you want to maybe specify some materials by zoning district, or do we just not, chain link is cool?
Deal with that another time, I think, but
At some point we should, I'll note the one over by Ithaca College that's built out of old doors.
Oh, yeah, up on
Cool.
96.
Stanby, yeah.
oh, that's
Yeah.
so great.
Yeah, 96B.
I mean, I
Okay, but-
understand chain link, but it's really not very attractive. I mean, I think it's pretty cost effective.
It's good for vines.
Like,
CJ's like, what are you talking
You can put some
I'm just
great,
thinking, some places want, like aren't cool with walls being made of like, concrete block or whatever, or, fences in certain zoning districts can't, like the industrial areas, like chain link's probably cool, but maybe
Yeah.
you don't want to see it in like Ludlowville.
I don't know. I kind of prefer chain link that you can see through and see the foliage on the other side over a blank wooden wall facing me or a concrete block wall facing the road. It seems to me that something that you can see through and still does the job is a more visually acceptable to me.
I would disagree with that because I wouldn't want to see the road from the inside.
Well, you have the option. We're not saying that you can't do that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
And that you shouldn't restrict chain link based on subjective values when some of us think that chain link is a really nice thing because you get the view through it instead of having a fence that blocks your view off.
You can see the pooch on the other side.
Right, or the kids playing, or the or whatever's going on back there.
I will point out the fence in Ludloville where Salmon Creek meets Ludloville Road, in which you basically have this wall along the street of boards, which is not really an attractive streetscape.
Blocks everything.
Yellow house there.
Be able to see through, so you could.
Oh, yeah.
I think we're getting off track here, telling people what to do.
We wind down?
Okay. All right, well, thank you.
Do we have
Thanks for that. It's good
do we have
progress.
part of our regulation? I can't remember. Is our fences allowed right at the property line, or is there some distance off the property line yet?
Right at the property line.
It might be wise to put it at a foot off the property line or 6 inches or something so property line disputes don't arise, but I don't know if that's anything that we have to worry about either.
Well,
It's that hard.
in maintenance of the fence. So if you're
Ooh.
right on the property line, the person that owns the fence cannot maintain it without going on to somebody else's property.
Right. So if you've got the board section facing your neighbor, for instance, because the posts are required to be on your side, in order to paint it, you have to get their permission. And it probably would be wise for us to set it up so that you're a foot or two off the property line.
Correct.
Who mows the grass on the other side?
Nobody. That's where you have that natural wildflower.
Vines, the vines. I think we should see what other towns do. I understand what you're saying 100%, but, and ag is exempt, so.
So if you have a 36-inch lawnmower, you better be 3 feet back, right?
I'm just saying, I think we ought to see what's
Fences
normal
usually,
practice and live with it.
fences usually go up for a reason on property lines, and it usually has to do with the fact that neighbors aren't necessarily getting along.
Yeah,
So requiring you to maintain your fence by walking on the neighbor's property who's not very happy with you to begin with could be problematic, although I don't know that we've ever had any complaints. Anyway,
Okay, let's, this doesn't have to be uniform throughout the town either. That's why I was kind of suggesting that we think maybe of different materials in different places where you think they might be appropriate, but we don't have to get into that right now, only that you might be interested in something like
Yeah.
that. It seems like there's some variation in how people,
You
feel about
fences.
this, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is great. That means there'll be opportunity for many different types and configurations, so. Okay, so thank you very much for that. I would hopefully, because we're not gonna have an October working meeting, I'd like to have the heated meeting training either hopefully November or December. I don't know if you have a preference for one over the other. But we need 1.5 hours still of the communication kind of conflicts piece. So based on a handout that Joe had actually picked up of me from some attorneys at, I don't remember where it was, Association of Towns or something like that. I was going to ask Guy to help me put together an 1.5-hour training on for you and the zoning board on facilitated heated meetings. So that sounds good.
let's do that in December.
December, okay.
And let's do we have a working meeting in November?
Yes, we should be able to do that, and hopefully we can wrap this up.
Let's
Right
plan
about
on
then.
wrapping it up, whatever it takes in the November working meeting.
Okay, November 9th then.
everything else to a minimum if we can. There's not all that much left to go. And a lot of it, I think, can be quick.
The good news is there is a 5th Monday in November. So if you guys did want to, if there were some extra loose ends to tie up, we could either do the training on that 5th Monday in November, or we could do, wrap up the land use ordinance audit at the December meeting. It's up to you. I don't know, however you want to configure them.
Try to wrap it up at the working meeting in November.
Okay.
And
And
then
then,
we'll decide at that point if we have so much going on that we need to have an extra meeting for something in November, we can. But is there only one meeting in December?
no, we have 2 meetings scheduled, I think. Yeah, we've got one currently, I think, scheduled on the 14th and one, no, is that right? Hold on a second.
Historically, we haven't had one later, but whatever y'all want.
Yeah. Hold on a second. Let me see. Deadlines. Okay, yeah. So we have a meeting scheduled, just one meeting in December on the 21st.
Yeah.
Is what we currently have scheduled. Does that sound right?
And how come we don't have the early meeting, the second?
We
Monday?
could have that still as a working meeting. I still have that on the calendar. So it would be the 14th and then the 21st instead of the 14th and 28th, if that sounds okay.
Well, let's see what happens in November. We might be
Okay.
able to do away with the 21st as that gets close to Christmas, if we can, and go with the 14th instead, depending on how much work we have to get done.
Yeah, I anticipate we'll probably have some, major submittals in November for the December meeting. I've already let the Britton Woods subdivision know that their preliminary plat their final plat needs to be filed in January. So who knows when they'll be back.
Notice that 5th Monday if it's a working meeting.
It was just an idea.
Yeah, I'm just saying, we need to notice it ahead of time. And he was saying, well, we'll see what we get done. I'm just,
Yeah, how far do we need to notice it? 2 weeks?
Oh, yeah, that's fine. If for some reason the meeting on the 9th, you want to have an additional meeting on the 30th, that's no worries. We can make sure that's posted.
But I would think we can get through this pretty quickly. Where are we going when we get done with the audit?
Well, then we're going to writing up essentially our list of recommendations based on the audit, the things that we want to change, and the things we want to focus on in the land use ordinance audit over the next, ideally, we could get the text and graphics updated, over the next 12 to 18 months. And maybe this is a good segue into the work plan. I think it would be super beneficial to hire out the graphics element of it. As much as I would love to have the time to be working on this, I just don't. So unless there's recommendations you want to make to the town board about my work plan for the next year, there's a lot going on. So I was hoping you guys could take a look at that. And maybe not necessarily at this meeting, but maybe at the next planning board meeting, if you could give me a sense of where you want me to shift my time around, what you want me to dedicate more time to, less time to, I really need your input to give to the town board.
Understand on that was at the end, you have some sort of 7% shift. It had 159 hours. And then a 7% shift that I didn't understand what that was for.
Yeah, just contingency, like coronavirus or, some wacky thing that pops out of the air, like, hiring one clerk and then hiring another one,
You stipulated, let me see if I can get it straight. If you stipulated 1,959 hours, and ended up with 1839 or whatever it was after the 7% shift, is that taking 7% off each of the action items that you had? Where you totaled up your hours for each of the separate things that you would do?
That's a good question. And normally I'd just say it would probably, just be shaved off of some of the core planning functions, but maybe it would come off of one of the projects, depending on if one of them were stalled for some reason. That can, of course, happen from time to time.
Well, let's make sure everybody reads through it.
Yeah, it's
And
just a one page. It's like
Yeah.
a big chart.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, here's all my time. Ideally, I would have loved to bring somebody on part-time this year. I think, an additional part-time planner to cover a lot of some of the core planning functions could really help. But budgets being what they are, I'm trying to be mindful about stretching the town's dollar, as far as possible, which is why I went after some money for consulting. I think I told you already that we did win the money for the town center stormwater, and then to finish up the traffic impact study. So that was paid 100%, which is great. And I'm hoping to do the same thing again with Magic for the graphics for the zoning ordinance. I think having a really nice, easy to use zoning ordinance will be just so fabulous for everyone, for you and the public, and really making that as graphically enhanced and as tied as we possibly can to parcel information and data. I think will also encourage the kind of development that we want to see too. So it has multiple factors working for it. If I can win money to make that happen, which I'm going to try, we could end up with a really nice product that you guys could really just focus on the editing. I can focus on some of the heavy text pieces of, and then that firm can really focus on like the big graphics lift and kind of tying it together into E-code and into the map. So that's kind of my idea, because I know you want to be done with kind of this major overhaul, so.
are we at a point where we want to try to make the land use ordinance more of an internet specific filled with links rather than a paper report? I mean, the paper report would still have to be there, but for the most part, it would end up being something that's very convenient to use, filled with links to different articles or different definitions rather than shifting pieces of paper around. I don't know if we're quite there yet. I know in our offices, we're not quite there, able to get rid of a lot of the paper, but
yeah, that's exactly where we're headed. See here, so this is chapter 270. Now all of the town's local laws have been codified. And
Yep.
so now, you can click here for the zoning map and you can see all the different districts. I think one thing that we can really use to help bring this alive will be to start to tie some of the parcel information to the zoning map, or people can click on it and find out more about it rather than being like, what zone am I in? I don't really know. And then also beyond that, like having graphically enhanced pieces like the buffers, like, having people understand ahead of time, like what's expected of them in terms of like, if you're building such and such a project in such a location, like the planning board's going to come expecting you to have a buffer that's, at least 15 feet, or, 15 to 20 feet, or however, what the parameters you want. It should be solid. It should be these particular diameter, breadth, height, trees, like. And then also with signs, I think there's a lot we could do with signs. That could be cool to update. Maybe that's the next part of the project. But, I know you guys did a lot of work on the land use ordinance update already, and I want to keep that going, graphically enhance it to the greatest degree we can, at least initially. And, win money to try to do this, because I think it's really important to make this easy for people. If we want to have really good development, I think we have to make it easy for people beyond just attorneys. So
and even planning board members.
serious.
Mhm.
I'm serious. I mean, it really is.
Yep.
I think we really hobble ourselves in economic development and don't necessarily bring the projects that we want. And it's not anyone's fault. I don't mean to be like, oh, this is bad. It's just like, kind of legacy text. Like it's okay, But so anyway, so that's kind of what I have in mind for 2021. So if you guys would look at that work plan and let me know how you want me to move hours around. If there's committees you don't want me to be attending and you think I should put more time into the land use ordinance, or there's core planning functions you want me to try to, limit to a certain number of hours a week, just tell me what you guys want, as far as my time. So anyway.
Very good. We'll go over that at the
Yeah.
next meeting.
Okay, yeah, thanks for giving that a look. Any advice is appreciated. We want to make sure we're serving, you. So.
You have anything else you need to say?
No, I think I've talked your ear off tonight. So
It was good.
thank you.
All right. The meeting's adjourned. Everybody have a great time and stay safe.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
See you soon.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right.